How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, you remember this case down in Tamarack, Florida. This is our royal son, DeLuca Rowe. And remember, the pigs slammed his head into the pavement for absolutely no reason at all. Well, let's get into it and find out what happened to some of these pigs. Well, I have here, Florida police deputy is fired after being caught on camera slamming a 15-year-old boy's head into the sidewalk and punching him when he tried to pick up a cell phone that had fallen on the floor. Should have said ground. A Florida sheriff's deputy has been fired after a video of him slamming a teenage boy's head into the ground during an arrest went viral. Deputy Christopher Kirkovich made national headlines in April after footage showing him slamming 15-year-old DeLuca Rowe's head in the ground in Tamarack, Florida. The incident spurred criminal charges against Kirkovich and two other deputies, and he was fired by the Broward County Sheriff Office on Tuesday after staff concluded a review and disciplinary hearings for the case. Sheriff Greg Toney addressed Kirkovich's removal in a press conference on Wednesday. He was terminated yesterday because we didn't have a policy. Now listen to this. We didn't have a policy in place that provides deputies the opportunity to slam people's faces, head in the ground, especially under these circumstances, Toney said, according to Sun Sentinel. And that's the pig that slammed him, Christopher. That's our royal son, DeLuca. Let's see here. Some of the stuff I'm going to skip. Let me see what else we have here. So, Rowe was initially arrested for assaulting an officer, but those charges were later dropped. Toney clarified that there may come a time, now listen to this, a time when such force is necessary. But it seems Kirkovich's confrontation with the teenager was not among them. Kirkovich is expected to fight the termination. Now I'm going to leave that right there. And I'm going to tell you the real reason why he was fired. So I'm going to play this first video, and then I'm going to play the full press conference. The audio might be a little bit janky on the press conference, but it's louder than the norm. But let's get into this first one.
Because we don't have a policy in place that provides deputies
the opportunity to slam people's face head into the ground.
Now at 7, the BSO deputy caught on camera punching and slamming a 15-year-old's head into the ground early this year has been fired. Broward Sheriff Gregory Toney said he made the call to fire the deputy against the recommendation of the agency's Professional Standards Committee.
The president of the deputies union blasting that move today, calling it politically motivated. But the victim's family attorney saying the deputy's firing is a significant step in the right direction. CBS 4's Carrie Codd is joining us now live with much more on this story. Carrie.
Well, when we sat down this morning to speak to Broward Sheriff Gregory Toney here at the Public Safety Building, he told me that he determined that Broward Sheriff's Deputy Christopher Kirkovich committed a clear violation of BSO's use of force policy. It is video that made national news. Broward Sheriff's deputies pepper spraying teenager DeLuca Roll, throwing him to the ground, slamming his head into the pavement and punching him. On Wednesday, Broward Sheriff Gregory Toney sat down with me and told me he decided to terminate Deputy Christopher Krikovich, seen on the video slamming Roll's head into the ground.
We don't have a policy that provides deputies an opportunity to slam someone's face into the ground.
The internal affairs case of Sergeant Gregory Lacera, who pepper sprayed Roll and threw him down, is still pending. Tony explained why he arrived at the decision on Krikovich. In that situation, and there was a lot going on there.
Absolutely.
But what should have taken place?
Well, I don't want to go into the shoulda aspect of it, but what I can tell you is we have to be measured in the level of force that we use. Okay, so what that means is when we are applying force, is it reasonable? Is it necessary? And is it proportional to what we're dealing with? For the set of circumstances and what my deputies were dealing with, okay, an obstructionist, a rude, dismissive, even exhibiting signs of aggression, okay, from a minor, still doesn't gravitate towards, are we going to start slamming people's faces into the ground for those activities? And that's what I won't tolerate here.
Tony's decision went against a recommendation from an oversight panel that reviews BSO's internal affairs cases. The Professional Standards Committee recommended that Krikovich be cleared. Tony talked about it at a news conference Wednesday.
They elected to forward a recommendation to me of exoneration, that there should be no disciplinary action taken. I disagreed with that recommendation.
I'm appalled in here listening to the sheriff.
Tony took heat for the decision from Jeff Bell, president of the BSO Deputies Association.
It was a unanimous vote for exoneration on that, and it's almost impossible to have that.
Bell also criticized the sheriff after the Tamarack incident, saying BSO had put in place more aggressive training that resulted in this response. But Tony said that's not true, and the BSO has not changed any of their use of force policies.
The union president responded in a manner that was not consistent with policies that he should be aware of as a deputy that works for me in this organization. And I think it did nothing but inflame this community to believe something that was false.
Tony did admit that when he takes these types of disciplinary actions against deputies, there is fallout. Are you concerned about the potential blowback from deputies who feel like maybe you're taking too hard of a stance?
Look, anytime I take a disciplinary action against any deputy in this organization, it impacts morale. When we have these incidents that transpire where we are in excess, or we have stepped outside the lines, it will impact morale for those people who think it's suitable. For the majority of the good men and women here that work in this organization, they understand that a line cannot be crossed and that I have to hold them accountable when they do.
But the bottom line is Tony believes his decision will show the community that BSO will be transparent and hold employees accountable.
And so I want the community to understand that when these incidents take place, I don't care if it's a black kid, white kid, what community they're from, we will hold people accountable. It's that simple.
The attorney for Christopher Krikovich sent me a statement today. In it, he said that it is unprecedented for the sheriff to overturn an exoneration by the Professional Standards Committee. He also said that Krikovich followed the training given to him by BSO. Deputies Krikovich and another deputy, Sergeant Gregory Lacera, face criminal charges related to this incident. We spoke for about 10 minutes with the sheriff this morning. He elaborated on a lot of topics, including saying that while he determined the use of force in this case was not appropriate, he said there might be cases where use of force, including what we saw in this video, might be necessary by deputies. Here's a bit of what he said.
This was not something that we were dealing with where it was life-threatening, okay? There was no weapons involved. The deputies' lives weren't in imminent danger. There was nothing that was presenting that would require a deputy to use that level of force. Now, there are circumstances that exist in this world where time may come where it is justified and called for to slam someone's face down into the ground, or maybe do even more to preserve your own life or someone else's. But that wasn't the case. That wasn't the environment, and that wasn't the time.
We will have more on this story on CBS 4 News at 11.
Okay, my royal family. Did y'all hear that? That they would consider slamming your head into the pavement. And something I picked up on watching the video, when they was slamming our royal son's head into the pavement, they took their nails and dug it into his face. Now, I have a 15-minute press conference that is absolutely necessary to listen to. And I'm going to tell y'all the real reason why Sheriff Tony fired, they call him Kirkovich. I don't give a damn how to pronounce his last name correctly. There's a reason why he did what he did. And he did not make that decision on his own. He has a group of advisors and attorneys that he go to too. And the union president, all of them like that. That's what they gonna do. They could have blew his brains out while he was asleep, and they wouldn't have seen no problem with it. That's how they get down in America when it comes to the royal family. And let's not lose sight that our royal son is a minor, and if his mother would have slightly tapped him, she would be locked up and CPS would be involved. This is also child abuse and also has affected our royal son's mental health.
The amount of concern, the case I'm back out to the public related to an internal affairs investigation that we were able to close out. It is pretty much overdue in terms of the amount of concern. The case I'm going to be talking about today has been kind of referenced throughout the community as the DeLuca case. This was an incident that transpired and occurred back in April where 3 of our deputies were involved in the arrest and apprehension of a young man, juvenile, last name DeLuca, and there was an allegation of excessive force that came in both from the community because we caught video footage of it and it was disseminated over to our office as to whether or not we were aware of it. And so upon receiving that notification, I initiated an internal affairs investigation so that we can do a fact-finding aspect to determine as to whether or not any of our deputies were involved in any form of excessive force or violated the laws in which they're supposed to be protecting. And so we were able to conclude that internal affairs investigation. And before I go too deeply into it, I want to bring something to your attention about the 3 deputies that were involved, in particular Sergeant Gregory Lucera. I will not be addressing anything related to his involvement in this case, as he has not been able to receive his entire due process elements that are afforded to him by law. We are still finalizing his involvement, and so I will not be speaking on those elements. But I will address the disciplinary actions that has taken place for 2 of the deputies, first of which is Deputy Christopher Krikovich, as well as Deputy Ralph Mackey. And before I dive into how this thing has transpired and where we've concluded, I want to recap to the public about what the internal affairs investigation process looks like and how we lead through not only the fact-finding aspect of what's occurred over the last few months, but also how it rolls into the hands of our professional standards committee, where they provide recommendations that are then forwarded to me. So of course, the first aspect of the internal affairs investigation, our staff, our team has done a great job at interviewing witnesses, business owners, analyzing, reviewing statements, looking at not only our body-worn camera, but also looking at any video footage that was available at the site location. And so they concluded their internal affairs investigation. They presented it to our professional standards committee, which is not abnormal, which is the practice here in this agency. Our professional standards committee has been around going back to the Ron Cochran era. Our professional standards committee is comprised of roughly 11 members. Of those 11 members, 2 are administrative personnel from the Department of Law Enforcement, 2 are administrative personnel from our Department of Detention, 2 are administrative or civilians, 1 is a union member, and then 4 are non-employees that are appointed at the will of the sheriff. That comprises our professional standards committee. Our professional standards committee will look at the internal affairs investigation and put forth a recommendation for what they think is a suitable disciplinary action under any case that may come through under internal affairs investigation. Now, that's the recap of how this process works. After the professional standards committee brings forth their recommendation, I, the sheriff, has the latitude to make a decision related to what was appropriate or what was not appropriate in terms of exonerating, terminating, suspending, so on and so forth. Once that decision is made, It is forwarded to the deputies who are involved in the incident, and then they have something referenced as a pre-disciplinary hearing, where they have pretty much another opportunity to present their viewpoint, their justifications for actions, or pretty much a final explanation. And that process has also took place. And the document was provided to me to review on behalf of these deputies and their lawyers, and I reviewed all pages of it. And so here we are today. The two deputies, in terms of discipline, I'll start with Deputy Krikovich. Deputy Krikovich was on all media platforms, was caught in the video, striking DeLuca, and also putting his head into the ground. The Professional Standards Committee was able to look at all the exact same facts that I looked at, and they elected to forward a recommendation to me of exoneration, that there should be no disciplinary action taken against Deputy Krikovich for his response on that day. And so, having looked at the exact same facts, not just all the reports, not just the videos, but even his pre-disciplinary hearing document that was provided to me, I disagreed with that recommendation. He was terminated yesterday. He was terminated because we don't have a policy in place that provides deputies the opportunity to slam people's face head into the ground, especially under those circumstances. That is not to say that there may not arise a time in a deputy's career or when they're out maybe fighting for their life where that type of action may be suitable. But that was not the case of which we dealt with. In terms of Deputy Ralph Mackey, the disciplinary actions that were held against him in terms of policy violation was a violation related to not activating his body-worn camera. And the disciplinary recommendation that was forwarded was a written reprimand, and I concurred with that. And so that was the final decision for his disciplinary action. That's the final disciplinary action for Deputy Krikovich. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
So you're saying you can't get into Lacera because it's still under investigation?
Yeah, there are some due process elements that he must be afforded before we can finalize the entire case in terms of the total conclusive aspect for discipline that's going to be recommended. And so we won't touch that at this time.
Sheriff, there was some criticism that after this happened that maybe the use of force policies had changed when you came into this agency. Can you address that? Was this a result of more aggressive training policy?
Yeah, unfortunately, when this took place, our union president, Jeff Bell, had made the comment that we had changed policies related to enhancing the type of aggression out there. We didn't change any policies. And you can pull all the different policy memorandums and statements that we've done. We have not introduced any type of program that provides or even encourages for our deputies to slam anyone's face into the ground.
Can you talk about the charge that was added for Sergeant Lacera?
The charge that was added?
It says under the note, charge added and charge removed. Am I reading it?
I won't touch anything related to Sergeant Lacera.
Okay.
When we conclude it, come back and we'll have that conversation at a later time. Anything else?
So what was your takeaway from all of this? Looking at all the videos, spent hours on this, what was your takeaway?
Well, I mean, it's crystal clear. When we look at policies that we have in place, when we look at what the expectations are for our deputies to respond, it comes down to really, quite simply, three things, okay? Without expecting the public to take a crash course 30-second understanding about use of force policy, what I looked at outside of all the evidence that was presented was whether or not it was reasonable type of response, was it necessary, and was it proportional to what we were dealing with in terms of the type of threat that exists out there. I think that's the quickest way to summarize it all. And then you supplement that with the fact that do we have any policies in place that force that type of response, that encourages it? Do we have any training in place that we are encouraging deputies under those type of circumstances and that type of resistance that we're dealing with to slam people face in the ground? It made it clear to me. And I will tell you from the Professional Standards Committee aspect, what I've been able to see and come to understand with my command staff is that there is always a cultural change. When the new sheriff comes in, the expectations change, the type of approach in terms of how we're going to handle discipline starts to evolve into who's the current sheriff and what's the administration trying to accomplish and what we are trying to establish. And so, like every other thing that I have come into, when I took or was afforded an opportunity to accept command of this agency back in January, It was a tip of the iceberg of what this community was seeing as one deficiency when it comes to all the active shooter things that's been very well documented and we've rectified. But being in this office for over 11 months, it's not a matter of just changing the cultural aspects for training protocols when it comes to active shooter, but also what the expectations are for the administration. And that trickles down to every single deputy and first responder that work under our command, because this is our command now. And so the messaging has to be correct. I've heard some comments that were concerning to me as to, well, he's taking more aggressive stance when it's a white kid. He's taking this type of response. And I'm here to tell you all, I can care less if we are violating the law and abusing our authorities among black people, white people, Hispanic, or any other. We've taken an oath to secure the laws of this entire state and this country. And that is not divided amongst race, creed, religion, origin, or anything else that separates us as individuals. And so what I've tried to push out to this community is to have a clear understanding that accountability means all of us. Not just the civilians out here that we expect to comply by the laws, but also the people who are supposed to be protecting the law.
So will there be any policy changes because of this?
No, at this point we've looked at, is there a mandate? Is there something within policy that we need to change? And I would remind this community that we have over 2 million plus contacts with civilians every single year. Of the 2 million contacts, very few result in arrest. Of the arrests that we have, an even smaller few result in the use of force. And when we deal with the use of force, an even smaller portion of that results in we need to institute an internal affairs investigation. It results into is this potential of excessive force. So when you start looking at these numbers, they get very small. It's an anomaly to deal with excessive force issues in this agency. And so the last thing I want to have is a knee-jerk reaction that we change policy that impacts public safety. Because the deputies need to have the latitude to use force, but they just have to use it appropriately, and they have to make sure they're using the right discretion for what they're dealing with.
Did professional standards say why they found this action?
The Professional Standards Committee put forth, basically, they check off a box in terms of sustained, non-sustained, exonerated. And there's not a real comprehensive collective group statement, so to speak, where they say, here's why we said X, Y, and Z. But I will tell you, having spoken to my command staff and talked to individuals who have served in this capacity, in the capacity of the Professional Standards Committee as a member, the cultural aspect has changed inside this committee, and it's changed numerous times, and I'm changing it again. I will tell you there are some things. You talk about policy aspects, we need to change policy. We're not diving into changing policies, but the process of which we select people who are going to sit on this Professional Standards Committee will be more robust, and that I will interview members who are going to be put on this committee. Now that may be unprecedented. It's normally been other command members that's been shift off the responsibility to do so. But if I'm going to lead this agency, if I'm going to set the standard for the expectation, it should come from my mouth to their ears, and they should understand what the expectations are as members on there. This Professional Standards Committee has also become too much of an adversarial process, where these are long, comprehensive debates are occurring between our union presidents and members on this commission, which impacts the ability for objectivity. Another thing that we've done in terms of changes, I brought forth a new director for the Professional Standards Committee who has been able to come in and bring a high degree of professionalism into this place, because he was a judge here in Broward County. Julio Gonzalez is now our director for the Professional Standards Committee, and can bring that level of professionalism, objectivity, and not allow these meetings to be controlled or manipulated where too much influence is taking place in this environment.
Was he the director during the findings on this?
We just brought Julio in, so he took forth probably a small portion of it.
Sheriff, you said after 11 months now, do you feel like that culture is starting to take hold? Do you feel things changing, and what is changing?
I think the culture aspect, yes, we've made a lot of progress. Continue to take work. It's not going to happen overnight. You don't rectify 6 years of culture over a span of 11 months, but you can definitely change the pace. One of the comparisons I use all the time with my command staff is, we are changing the direction of the ship. Okay, this is not a canoe, right? This doesn't take one person to turn this thing around. We're 5,500 strong here in this agency. We're an aircraft carrier, so we have to get everybody involved
to accept and understand where I'm trying to take this organization and what we can do for this community.
Have you started changing the makeup of the board aside from the judge?
We're in that process right now. We brought in the director, of course, Director Gonzalez, and we're going to be doing some shuffling effect in terms of putting new, fresh eyes in there, new membership. Yes.
You said this, I can't remember it started. You said, was it 4 members?
We had 11 total.
11 total?
11 total in the Professional Standards Committee.
From the sheriff's office?
So I'll give you a breakdown again. So there's 2 administrative members from law enforcement, the Department of Law Enforcement, 2 administrative members from the Department of Detention, 2 administrative members who are civilians or from the civilian capacity, 1 union member, and then we have 4 non-employees that can be selected by the sheriff.
Okay. And have you spoken to Mr. Roll's family about this?
No, I have not.
Okay. Anything that you intend to tell them, or do you intend to?
Well, I'll tell them this, and this is not a message exclusive for the family. This is a message for the community. You know, there's anytime we have some form of excessive force allegation, anytime something pops up on the camera, there's an immediate outcry that we terminate people, that we get rid of them, that it's not just. We cannot operate that way as a law enforcement organization. But what I'm trying to establish here, and being consistent and stepping before the camera, not only when things are bad, but when my deputies do good, I'm also here saying they did the right thing, is to get the message out that we are holding people accountable. It requires patience if they want this thing to be done right, in terms of an internal affairs investigation, professional standards committee, pre-disciplinary hearings. All these things are non-negotiable. We have to have that process in place, but the public should come to understand that we will be consistent about holding our members accountable and that we will not hide anything in this organization, even when we are wrong. Anything else? Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, my royal family. So, as we continue on, I'm going to play this short little video so y'all can know who the players are involved. So, this is going to be a 34-second video, and this was back in September 26, 2019. So they said a jury has delivered a not guilty verdict in the trial of Broward Sheriff officer deputy accused of falsifying a police report on a pepper spraying incident. Okay. I love how they use the titles. So the verdict arrives hours after the judge denied Deputy Ralph Mackey's defense team a motion for acquittal Thursday. All right. So I want y'all to see who this person is.
Yesterday was decision day for BSO Deputy Ralph Mackey. A jury found him not guilty of falsifying an arrest report about the tough takedown of 15-year-old DeLuca Roll outside of Tamarack McDonald's in April. The panel determined he did not lie to cover up his fellow deputies' alleged misconduct.
We're pleased that the court dismissed the conspiracy charge outright, and the jury did the rest of the job. Detective Mackey looks forward to going back to work as a Broward Sheriff's deputy.
Well, after the arrest, 2 other deputies were charged with using excessive force in that arrest. Yesterday was...
Okay, so this is something I've been talking about a lot in the police force, is that if the police tells the gospel truth, plus we got footage of exactly what they did, and it was the most horrific police brutality that we have ever seen, they will keep their job. Now, let's go back over here to the rest of this article on Daily Mail that I'm picking apart. So we already know that they didn't want no disciplinary charges for Krakovich or Kirkovich or whatever. And in here it says, I'm going to read this to y'all. So they were saying Kirkovich and Deputy Gregory Lacera, who was also involved in the incident, were previously charged with misdemeanor battery charges and falsifying records. So it was believed that the two deputies attempt to falsify their police report of the arrest to avoid any disciplinary actions. A third officer, Ralph Mackey, was charged with falsifying records in a conspiracy to falsify records, and based on their research, they saying that or their investigation, and he went to trial, that he didn't do it. Mackey was found not guilty after a jury. Okay, I already read that. One count of falsifying records. And is there anything else in here before I get deeper into it? So, make sure I got it all. Because a lot of times this stuff repeats itself, and I don't want to keep saying the same redundant shit to y'all. Okay. So, let's go back over here. Now, the fraternal order is upset that Sheriff Tony wouldn't take up their recommendations, and I had earlier said that he didn't make up that decision on his own. Now, eventually, DeLuca's family is going to civilly charge the taxpayers. This come out of our pocket. They don't get affected by it monetarily at all. If they did, the dynamics would truly change. And the reason why the police chief did what he did, because when he was consulting behind scenes with his folks, the awardment amount would be even bigger, because based on the police that were caught falsifying records, it ain't gonna balance out, and they'll also have punitive damages for lying, point blank. So this is nothing more, my royal family, than a business decision. They're trying not to overcharge the taxpayers in the state of Florida, or let alone in that little county. That's a little place over there. But they've been having a lot of problems, and that's the reason why they hired this coon, because he's supposed to be cleaning up the department, because they greasy like all the apartments in America. And whoever else he's talking with is saying, the taxpayers is having to fork over a lot of money. This may also affect when we get our next budget. It's a lot of moving parts, but it's all about money. And the fraternal order is too dumb to recognize that. They don't care at all. What the fraternal order is doing is exactly what they're supposed to do in a war. They're supposed to be greasy and grimy, play real dumb and stupid, like they don't know what happened, and fully protect their people no matter what. Keep that in mind, my royal family. They're staying on code, and they look greasy, because we are in the information technology, and Big Brother is watching everybody. And the enemy is like, that didn't happen. I don't care if you've seen it or not. But again and again and again, this all have to do with money. They don't give a damn about DeLuca or any of the royal family. So they trying to lessen the amount of coins that DeLuca will receive, because these cops will never get it. They train them to falsify records. When I started, because we do a lot of videos. When I started reading, I read tons of articles, and it hit me one day. I said, dang, if they told the gospel truth, you mean to tell me they wouldn't lose their job? That is quite interesting. It's quite interesting to me. But they won't get that because they're only doing what's according to their nature. And all this stuff about training and all that, you heard him. He said it wasn't a training issue. But this coon is even considering putting in a policy that if you got to slam a nigga in the head, slam a nigga in the head. Do whatever it takes. So we need to do whatever it takes to do in this war. There is absolutely no rules at all. Pay attention, my royal family. We got to be sharp. We got to read in between the lines. We really do. So that is it, and that is all. It hurts me to my core to show y'all this picture, but sometimes I have to be over dramatic to overemphasize what we continue to deal with in this dying system. So my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.